Well, now it's time for you as audience participants to become a part of this conversation. So let's hear from you. What do you think about what our panelists have already talked about? Are there any questions or comments? So let's start with you before I go to our Facebook Live, okay? So let's hear from you. Okay, we have someone up here, and I think a gentleman over here.
Well, thank you all so much for all of your comments. I'm kind of curious what you thought of the Grammy Awards this year with the two blues albums that won for Best Album. You had Taj Mahal and Keb' had teamed up and they won for Best Contemporary Blues Album, and then the Rolling Stones won for Best Traditional Blues Album with covers of Little Walter and I think it just and Howlin' Wolf, and it just goes to everything that you've been talking about.
Well, I'll tell you the
bogus.
What's it? Well, the Grammy. Do you know how the Grammys, like the voting actually works? Is that if you win a Grammy, then you get to vote on who's going to get the Grammy. So a lot of times what will happen is when I found this out because I was working for the Honolulu Symphony, and somebody had played on a record that Chicago Symphony Orchestra did that won a Grammy, right? So now he would get a ballot, and so he would like check all the things that he knew about in the classical stuff, and then he'd come over and he'd say, "Hey, Gene, here are these jazz guys. Who do you think I should vote for?" And I'd tell him. So you can imagine that somebody's out there like with all the pop people and all. So they're sitting there looking at that list, right? And the Rolling Stones come up and they're like, "Oh, wow, I know the Rolling Stones. I don't know these other guys, so I'll vote for them." So I think it's just people perpetuate. And that album, I have to say, it wasn't a good Rolling Stones album, and it wasn't a good blues album, in my opinion. So it sort of missed on both counts. But I think that it's kind of a popularity contest, and when you start getting closer to these awards seasons, you start seeing the things that people are doing to manipulate the people who are doing the voting. So there's an article on all of a sudden there's this wonderful piece on CBS Sunday Morning on an artist who's up for an award or something. That's all trying to influence the people who are making the decisions on it. So I don't put a lot of stock in award shows.
Ditto to what he said, and it's an absolute travesty for them to do that. And that's why when you go to different the Blues Music Awards, this isn't the National Blues Museum now, this is Dion talking from my community, from where I stand at. Mm-hmm. So that to me is a lack of respect to the great blues artists out there, that you'll take the Rolling Stones and do that. I mean, you got artists, Mr. Cannon. I mean, the list is, I don't want to take up all the time looking at the clock. But not that they're not deserving. They're a great band, more power to them. But you couldn't find anybody else this year to put out a blues album that you had to give it to the Rolling Stones. All that does is just keep that conversation going, taking the rest. You're dividing the blues fan base, is what you're doing.
Okay, I thought I saw a couple of more hands. I see over here. And then in the back. Okay.
Wait, hang on.
Wait. Yeah, because we're live streaming. Thank you.
Something John touched on earlier about the city of St. Louis, in the region as a whole, not really backing the blues. You open up almost any magazine, newspaper, television, what have you, and you see ads, Memphis music, come enjoy Memphis music. Come New Orleans, come enjoy New Orleans music, Chicago, what have you. How do we get the city of St. Louis to recognize what the gem that they have here and embrace it and publicize it? And that's my question. You guys can take it from there.
Great question. We need to get behind the band, the venues, the National Blues Museum. Everybody needs to go sit over there at the America Center, the CVC, whatever, and do that, because Memphis promotes their music. Nashville, like you just said, all those that's their creative economy is what they call it in Mississippi. They're driving people for that. Jeremy has talked to me since I've been here about St. Louis doesn't do enough to promote its live music and its musical heritage. You got the St. Louis Blues here that's named after W.C. Handy's St. Louis, and we don't even promote it outside of St. Louis. That's a community thing that we need to promote. And it's not just blues music, but you got the jazz, you got all music. This is a great music city, and that's who has the far-reaching arm to reach the world.
Yeah, I mean, indeed. I mean, you say you've got artists here who are who were the leaders in many movements. We have a great heritage, and it's across the spectrum. Ike and Tina Turner, right, and Chuck Berry. These folks are known as the Godfathers. Somebody like Miles Davis,
Exactly.
is one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, and that's us. That's St. Louis, and that's something that. But I'll tell you, when I've seen some of the things that the Convention and Visitor Bureaus put out, the arts have just a little sliver. We're mentioned, right? The arts in general are mentioned, but it's just this little tiny sliver of the overall message. And I think that the way to change that is for us to get out, and make sure that we're having those conversations, and also I think that the arts communities, the music community, coming together, maybe this is the thing. We talked to Joe Edwards, and go on down there.
And look what Joe does over there.
Absolutely. I mean, he's one of those guys that's carrying the flag, but he could use, he could use some allies.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a question. I do believe we have a question here, but I think Darian, you've been standing for a while. Can we get to Darian, then come back up here? Because he's been standing for a while. Go ahead. You just helping? Okay, then let's go back up here. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, gentlemen, for all of your input today. And I had a couple questions. I think as a musician, coming down today and also being white, I was a little nervous about the conversation. And
Let's tell the truth. That's what we're here for.
Right.
Okay?
Well, of course, and I think for people that, are very sensitive and very empathetic and sensitive to understanding racism in St. Louis, because St. Louis is its own little thing. And I didn't personally understand it until Mike Brown, really, because I lived here when I was a kid, and then I left to Los Angeles, which is very diverse, and then I came back. And seeing Mike Brown opened my eyes to a lot of pain that goes back for a long, long time in St. Louis, and it's very upsetting, And so I think I came here today, the reality of blues music today, expecting a conversation from a standpoint of going forward. So I had a couple questions relating to, number one, we touched briefly on it and kind of moved on, but the concept of appropriation, and I'm asking these questions to better understand the topic. So I'm going to throw you a couple softballs. So question number one that I had was, what would be the difference, say, in Led Zeppelin's Lemon Song, which I thought of that. The Lemon Song was basically the Killing Floor riff with the Squeeze My Lemon line was George Patton? I forget. What is the difference between Led Zeppelin doing that and putting that on a rock and roll record in 1970 whatever versus, let's say, Lenny Kravitz taking Earth, Wind, and Fire's That's the Way of the World and writing a song, It Ain't Over Till It's Over. Let's say, what's the difference between Led Zeppelin learning a language, coming out with something that they felt was a piece of art that they could sell, and then on the topic of copyright laws, Lenny Kravitz taking an Earth, Wind, and Fire song? Serious question. I mean, just what are your thoughts?
My personal opinion is just the respect of it. I think everybody should be able to take a song and make music. Whatever, if you can take it and put your artistic form on it, more power to you, go do it. But give homage and appropriations. Make sure those who you took it from to make yours, make sure they get paid for it. Mm-hmm. Just respect the art form. Go make it, because it's going to evolve. But then on the same token, rap music has been around that was supposed to die, and it hasn't. And it's nobody stealing that yet. Well, not stealing it. They're more educated now on making sure that music is taken care of. But who performs a song? Man, go do it. Make that money. Be artistic. Do your thing. Just make sure the people who you're taking from gets the credit and gets paid for it. My opinion.
Yeah, that was gonna be my thing. Is like, is who's getting paid, who's profiting, who's benefiting from this culture. So you're going to find, you say that you respect it, you say that you honor it, but and you're happy to make a lot of money from it. But are you sharing anything with the folks that brought it to you, that created it? I think that's Dion said it very well. It's fair is fair, right? Fair is fair, and also, I think that there's there's a level of appropriateness. If you're talking, a lot of the folks who were coming out of from the British invasion, they saw their experience reflected in when the hardships that African Americans faced. Now, it may have been superficial, but it resonated. And I'm not saying that it was or it wasn't. It may have been, but they found something there. But when you look, I remember like hearing a song, this John Lee Hooker song, talking about asking the warden to pass the water around, and so you have in this song this guy who's in the prison system, unjustly just wanting to get a drink of water, and the warden saying, nobody's getting anything till the sun goes down. So that's a real different that's where the music comes from. It's much different than some people who, the stuff that they're singing about sound, just partying and having fun. And I think that there's that recognizing and, as you say, respecting the music and where it comes from is very important.
Okay, I know before I come back to you, Bob has had his hand up too. So Bob, and then we'll come back. And I think I saw a hand over here on the corner before I come back to the gentleman here.
I'll fess up, I'm actually writing about the series for the Blues Society and KDHX. But let me share something with you. I came back here, moved here 2.5 years ago, after I've been gone 38 years. And I called Dion the first day on the job at that papered over building and said, you don't know me, here's my name, here's my phone number, I want to volunteer. And I had zero knowledge of the blues. I was a blues lover, but I had no idea of what St. Louis had to offer. How much live music, how much great music, how many wonderful musicians. So it was stunning to me to get engaged and involved. And in writing about this stuff and learning more history, it's like, in a way, we need to learn to blow our own horn, right, for this reality. And we don't do that so well. And that's not a knock against anybody here. But I look at Chicago and New Orleans and Memphis, and I wrote this last month actually, and just saying, it's really weird in talking about the 17 and 17 CD. This is a town that never had a recording industry per se. There was no Stax that got lined up all the R&B and gave a face and a brand to Memphis. There was no Sun that locked up rockabilly and gave that same face to Memphis. There was no record companies like in Chicago that gave it a shape to that sound, that promoted it. I grew up with Motown, right? that shaped what was the Detroit sound, which actually is blues at its base, as Jimmy Hines said here last week, talking about that. I didn't know that growing up there. I knew Bob Seger and I knew Motown. I've learned a lot, but it strikes me that St. Louis is not strictly defined by a narrow definition of it. That our taste, our music is very broad in its base, and it's actually something to be celebrated, what you have all talked about how broad the music base is and how much there is and how much live there is. We come to the museum, I talk to these Europeans that come in every week. They've heard about St. Louis. They know about it, and the word is spreading there. I also talk to a lot of St. Louisans who stumble in, who had no idea it really was there. And I ask every one of them, do you want to go see some live music? And the answer I get is, well, yeah. I hate the ones, and there's a lot of come in and saying, well, I'm headed to the airport after I see the museum. But I said, do you want to see a live scene? And I give them the live card, right? And show them, here's these clubs. Here's 3 clubs a mile away down Broadway. And they're like blown away, and the Europeans, because they've got one club in their town. And this prompted me to go back and look at my hometown of Detroit. And I went to the Blues Society there, and I actually plotted where are all the clubs they're advertising. There was a handful of clubs across an arc that is 5 times the size of this metropolitan area. So it tells you something. So I think we've really got to get a hook much more on how we do our own self-promotion to the outer world. And I think the museum provides that. I think the clubs we have provide that. But it is striking to me that there's a whole lot of folks who just live here who still don't have a clue about any of this stuff. And we're dealing with the fear factor, as you have well identified. Violence, race, they won't come into the city, you know. It's crazy. But I think those are the realities of the present reality of blues in St. Louis.
Okay, we have a gentleman over here who's been patiently waiting.
Hi. Hi, my name is Kevin O'Connor. I've been playing music, blues music and all of its relatives for about 20 years. I'm 38 years old, and I absolutely love this city. I love what St. Louis has provided, and I've played with a lot of fantastic musicians over the years. And if I could quote a really great scholar from Wash U named Gerald Early, he said that 1,000 years from now, whatever's left of the United States, we will have baseball, our Constitution, and jazz music. Now, I agree with them. However, just to speak from what he said about jazz, I'm sure, you know, jazz being the firstborn child of the blues. You know, one of the panelists last week talked about how he loves the blues. The 145 is the blues. He doesn't want to hear anything other than the 145 blues, and I completely sympathize. I feel him. Well, also thinking about that, also what else is 145 is country music, bluegrass music, gospel music, even the Ramones, they're a punk rock band. It's all 145. A lot of times they sing about the same topics. There's a lot of commonality between the genres, and it all comes back to the blues. And I think of all the musicians who I've played with, black and white, young and old, we all share an absolute sense of reverence for the musicians who whether we cover or the new music we play. I do a lot of work over at Blue Lotus Studios with Paul Niehaus. We're doing this for the Blues Society every year. We co-write with some of the songs. We've put out Roland Johnson's first album at age 68. He's in covers his whole life. I'm part of helping him write songs. Then we did Gene Jackson's last year. And then this upcoming year, we're doing Kim Massey's first record. It's very exciting. And one of the things, the reason why I wanted to be here today is when we're talking about a very important issue, appropriation. It's a real issue. Nobody's denying that it has happened, does happen, but I think that I approach it from an optimistic standpoint, that of all the musicians who I play with in this town, they do so with, as I said, reverence, respect. Ultimately, I kind of get worried because, you know, I mean, when the topic of, well, have you gone down to Mississippi? Have you played? Well, yeah, I have. Are we going to have an asterisk by my Irish white name because, well, he's a white guy. You kind of, we want to be honest here.
Like I
feel that I feel that we kind of go down a dangerous road when we should talk about appropriation. It is important. But, I mean, are we going to put like asterisks by people's names? Or, well, they don't believe it belong to be on stage. They haven't lived the blues. I think that it kind of gets a little bit dangerous because nobody knows the struggles that I've gone through. Nobody knows the struggles of anybody that somebody's lived through. If we start saying that this white person can't sing the blues, they can't play the blues because, well, by golly, they're white. I think that's a little bit dangerous in the conversation. I think it's not very proactive. I think on stage, I've lived the most. On stage for me is the most perfect form of a meritocracy. If you're on stage, if you can hang, if you can play, you belong. It doesn't matter what you look like or how old or how young you are. And I think it's the optimism of playing with such great, fantastic people and having such friends across the spectrum. I think that's what I've always taken away from playing blues music in this town, is that sometimes we might have a solution, but we're looking for a problem, when the solution for me is the joy that we share on stage, and nobody's talking about, well, these white dudes over here. You know, it's like not honestly, none of my colleagues have ever said that. Well, he's a white dude, he can't hang. So.
Well, I'm looking.
Let me
Let you go ahead,
because,
and then I'll go to Facebook.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it was brought up about Mississippi and the culture. I believe everybody can play the blues. I don't believe it's just a black person, white person, Asian. Across the board, play it. If it's in you, play it. All I say is respect the history. I don't care who you're on the stage with. My point on all that is respect the history and the forefathers that even create this music form and what it take to make it. Play your heart out, because there's some great musicians out there. So it wasn't me that, if that was, I'm not for sure where that came from.
Yeah, because I don't think that anybody would suggest that you know, you have to be black to play the music, but it was a music that was created.
Even though they did get pissed at Hootie for playing country. Just so the record's straight.
But I think the real issue is that the folks who created, the African Americans who created the music, weren't able to enjoy the spoils of the success that the music would have when it was performed by people who weren't black.
Bobby Rush used to have to stand behind a curtain to perform. He couldn't come out on this stage and perform. So to know your history.
Yes, that's true. I'm looking at Allison. Do we have comments from the Facebook Live? Okay.
Oh.
Who has the mic? Let's pass it, because I'm looking too to see, cues for our Facebook audience.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have a lot of comments kind of just like in support of what y'all have been saying this whole, during this event. A couple specific questions from Terry Harden, who was here last time. He couldn't make it this time, but he's tuning in on Facebook. He asks, why do the black musicians have to come to the white clubs for recognition in St. Louis, and the white musicians never have to go to any of the black clubs?
I don't know. Uh-oh. Say that one more time. Terry's a member. Okay, but say that one more time.
Basically, the question is, why do black musicians have to come to white clubs, but white musicians don't have to go to black clubs to get recognition for their craft?
I don't understand the question, or because I can't answer that, because I don't.
You don't agree with it?
Did you say you understand what he's saying? Somebody said that?
Okay, because I have it too, because he also texts me.
Okay.
He's saying, why do black musicians have to, in other words, go to a white club in order to receive the recognition that they feel they deserve, versus white musicians going to black clubs? And so,
John.
Okay.
Been around longer than me.
The only way I can answer that is when I came here, I came from Colorado. And in Colorado, they didn't have a lot of blues. They had a lot of cowboys. And when I got here, it was the music that actually captured me. And along with that, to find that music at that time, the only place you could find it was at the black clubs for blues. And then as it hit the 70s and 80s, it started crossing over in different ones. Steve, you're back there, so you know what I'm talking about. And Johnny, same thing. And, all of us, we learned blues in black clubs from people that, hey, these people were people that we were enamored by and we were going to ask to learn how to play blues by real blues people. So we were going to black clubs, learning from black people and not from records. And along with that, carried on those friendships with people that nurtured us as musicians, as people. Oliver Sane nurtured a whole group of people in an industry by letting them know professionalism, integrity, publishing, craft, community. You don't badmouth people, you learn how to speak well with people and take care of it. So I'm not sure if I understand that question. There's probably more blues clubs right now that, because the majority of the audience is white, is that our problem?
No.
Or is it because there's a whole generation of people, the younger black people, that reject blues as a form because they've moved on? You know, they've always been innovators, so they're in a different space right now. I feel very strongly on this one because.
And I'll piggyback on what John's saying. And, you know, whatever blues clubs are here, whites may not be as tempted to go visit those establishments. Whereas the so-called white venues, they're a little bit more comfortable in those venues, if that makes sense. It's location. You can go to some places and same musician can play at this club over here that's considered a black club, but they go over here that's considered a white club. They're going to make that money there. Just because, especially for the National Blues Museum, you're going to get tourists in town. Not only the local crowd that you have following, you have tourists coming in with that disposable cash. So I don't know if it's, and then as far as the museum goes, we have Asian, white. I mean, it's just cutting your teeth. We can cut your teeth out if we can strike a deal on where you can make some money and we can make some money. Let's do this business.
And that's a question I've always wondered, never had a chance to ask you, John, is like, how much business do you get from, how much does the tourists who are just up the street, how much does that play in? Or, you know, is it
It's tremendous. It's tremendous. It's about 40% of our business is coming from out of town, and that doesn't speak well of a lot of St. Louis. It really doesn't. But what I really did, I just, you know, I feel so strongly on this one because when I look at the audiences at night at BB's, I'm seeing just a beautiful spectrum of people, man. I'm seeing white, black, young, old,
enjoying music.
Yeah, Europeans, Brazilians, and everybody's in the same room having a real good time, and they're not talking about what color you are.
Right. They're going to hear that music.
They're not talking about, oh, well, that's pretty good, but it's not authentic. Right. They're actually participating in an experience, which is not only the music, it's a venue and the people within it. And that's the thing that, if you're uncomfortable talking about it, then you do have issues. You really do. If you have a wide spectrum of friends and what you're doing is bringing those people together, then you got nothing to hide. You know, I mean, Kevin, you play with Boo Davis. For years. Right. You know, and I played with Henry, Bankhead, you know, doing my time. There's people in the room here that were doing it years and years before me, and everything that I know came from absorption and being mentored by people that I really cared, and I didn't care about what color they were. I cared about who they were as people. And some of the best people that I've ever met were blues musicians because they're honest. They're not politicians. They're honest.
I love that. I like you telling the truth. Okay, what else do we have, Allison? And then I'll go back to the our audience here. Do we have anything else that you want to bring up from Facebook?
Y'all have pretty much answered a lot of the questions that have come up.
Okay, great. Okay, we have someone else
Marty.
right here. Okay.
Yeah, been knowing all you guys and been your venues, and I appreciate you all. One of the things that I want to kind of talk about in St. Louis is, to me, it seems like, I guess, racism and classism kind of coexist. Because what I see is in St. Louis, and being a musician here, growing up here and everything, and what I've seen here, is class. Blues was looked at as a lower class of music. whereas the symphony was this. You got everybody sitting in these chairs and all this and playing great music and everything. It was the upper crust, so to speak. So, you know, I had an issue with that, but in my town, it was like, you can go here to listen to music, but you better be careful about going there. If you go south, you better be careful about going there if you go this way. And the class always had a way of getting in the way of some way of keeping music from being all over the place. And what I love about blues music is that it was a people that everything they tried to do was taken away from them, and they still found a way to bring their music out or to express themselves. And what I did for myself was I went back to school to bonify a lot of things that I thought I knew. And one of the things that I really loved about when I went to school, and it was a music jazz class, and but we learned about blues, gospel, and how all these musics venues came together and how they support each other. And what I liked about the blues was, even though they didn't have any instruments and they were working hard, if they were laying railroad tracks, if they were digging in a hole, if they were doing anything like that, they still found their way to express themselves, to let you know what was going on. And when I went back to school, I heard this one song, and it was just these people laying down tracks, or working on the road, and it affected me so much because even though they had everything taken away from them, because if you learn the history of music for black people, they couldn't have drums because they learned how to communicate with other people. You know, there are other people, plantations and everything. They took that away from them, but still they found out or figured out how to take that to express themselves. And that's what I always love about blues. But the classism in this city, or in probably a lot of cities, stops people from going to other places and listening to music. But when something is going to be expressed, when it's going to be felt, you can't stop it. Because I played in the Red Room. I played in a lot of places in East St. Louis. And I would go to the Red Room, and I would see somebody like Dave Black. I said, what in the hell is he doing over here? You know, but they would learn, and the music would affect them so much, they would go to the ends of the earth to learn this music. And I think that's the thing that needs to be expressed and brought out more. That's why I love social media, because people, it's being learned, the truth is being sought out, and people can learn from that. And one thing that I always did, or what I did, was with my own children. When they thought that this is where that music came from, or they heard rappers doing this music and stuff, and they say, this is the original. I said, no. Let's go home, pull out the turntable, break out the albums, let me show you where this comes from. So being a musician, I was proud of the fact that I sat them down and showed them and gave them history of music. And it starts from home. It starts from being able to have access to things, and to music, and to history. Because, and one other things that you guys said that kind of bothered me, I guess it was the class. When I was playing with a band called Mojo Syndrome, I had some people come from like Chicago to visit us and stuff. And it's like what you said, Dion, a lot of people, they don't either know where it is or don't want to listen to it because they either listened to it before or heard it before, or like said, you guys want to come see my band? Oh, we know all about the blues. We don't need to hear about that. But it's the education that needs to keep going and break down these walls, these barriers that are in the way. And I think that's one of the biggest things that stops people from understanding and learning music. And that's why I love social media today, because it's getting out there. People are learning. And I have to take my hats off to the folks that are in this room, because They're here to learn, and hopefully we can break down more of those walls of classism that stops people from learning.
See,
Okay.
thanks, Marty. And Marty, that's what I love about the museum, because that music we do, the live music, that's such a small portion of what we do. That museum itself, it's a place to come together at and break those walls down. I mean, those kind of conversations. So thank you, Marty.
Well, one other thing too.
Hold on, because we need to capture
I'm sorry, go ahead.
your comment on Mike in order to have the right kind of audio. Go ahead.
Okay, one other thing too.
And we're going to have to start wrapping up, okay? So
I have
I
to
saw
take-
one other hand in the back, and we're going to make that it. Oh, you have one up here too? Okay, we're going to have to start wrapping it up. Okay,
I'm gonna
go
make
ahead.
this real short. My musical education, I have to, like, BB's is one of my musical education places. I've been playing down there for years and grew up watching people and learning from people, drummers and everything. Kirk Grice, Rayburn Hayes, all those folks were part of my education. But the blues, the jazz, and it's like you guys are the trinity of bringing this music together. BB's is a place where you can go listen to blues and jazz,
St. Louis?
Jazz St. Louis is one of the places where you can go listen to great jazz and learn about jazz. And then you go to the history, the National Blues Museum, which puts it all together, and you can come learn and understand where all this stuff comes from. So I take my hat off to all three of you guys.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right. Okay, as we start to wrap up, I think I have two more people, one up here in the front and then the last one in the back, okay?
Yeah, I just responded to the question about why people going to black clubs and vice versa. Oh, when I was 16, I lived a block and a half from Club Imperial. One day a friend of mine says, man, we gotta go up there on Tuesday. Ike and Tina Turner, we gotta go there. You know, we saw Bob Cuban at the swim party last week, but this ain't Bob Cuban. You know, and no black person at that time, at that age, I didn't have many black friends, but none of them ever come up and said, let's go see Bob Cuban. I think that kind of answered that question.
Okay, so we have one last question and comment. Let's try to wrap it up so we can get back to our panelists. Okay.
Charles Johnston, backing on what Marty was saying, or adding to it, in terms of class, again, I spent some time reading the history of the blues, and one of the things that struck me, it was in City of Angels. He talked about how, you know, the musicians would get who were playing on the riverboats would get off and then go to the clubs, and it was about that time also that the symphony would finish, and those musicians would come down to the clubs, and the two groups would jam together, and that's one of the and from that. I gather that, you know, the St. Louis sound was always more sophisticated than what most people think of as the blues. Another point there is that the musicians understand good music when they hear it, and they like to play with other musicians who play good music. The audiences, however, you know, they will segregate themselves or have segregated themselves. Nowadays, it's not as prevalent as it was in the past, but you still see it in some places. I've been trying to find clubs in North County to go to when I have money. Class and race, like Marty said, are co-equal in their effect on our society and the way we appreciate music. And the real point is that good musicians appreciate good music regardless of the source. It's the audiences we need to convince to open up their minds to other forms of music. And
So with that, if you don't mind, because I'm looking at the time, I do have one other last comment from Alonzo Townsend, okay? And then we'll wrap it up with our panelists to give us a takeaway as to, you know, just a minute per person if you can, some kind of takeaway for our audience. So Alonzo, then the panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Riles.
Okay.
So I was sitting on the sideline. I was on the sideline today because I wanted to soak it more up. Brother Kevin, you said something that had my mind going, so I wanted to address this real quick while I had the opportunity to. For a lot of you guys that do know me or know me growing up, I'm Henry's son. My dad's Henry Townsend, so I grew up in the blues. As growing up and now, a lot of people, as soon as you encounter me, the first thing I say, what's going on, brother? I don't care who you are, what color you are. A lot of people know that's how I talk. If you know me, that's how I talk. I do that with people that I don't know either. And a lot of times it's a double-edged sword. I do it for a reason because of that first thing. That's how my father raised me. I have no way to look at you, no matter what color you are. I have no reason to have any preconceived conception of you until you give me one. So that's the first reason I always go up and say anyone, hey, what's going on, brother? Hey, sister, I don't care what color you are. When I do that, the other double-edged sword of doing that is because some people are not like you, brother. Some people don't think like you. Some people, it's a handful of us. They come out the woodworks now because we have someone that's in executive power. But a lot of us are not the same. And even when I do that, I'll catch a side eye. A guy like, this black guy just called me brother. Who is this guy? Seriously, it happens. I do it on purpose a lot because not only is it in my heart, but it also, it weeds out for me. Because some people will side eye me or they'll cut the conversation real short with me. Those are the ones that don't think like us. They don't care about the heritage. That's why we have these conversations. I know sometimes it is a scary conversation to have for some people because they don't want to go down that road. It's like, hey, I play this, I love it. Let's not go down that road. Let's just play. But the reason we have these conversations is because we want you to understand the heritage. Not saying that you don't, but we want you to understand the heritage as we do, so not only that you can continue to nurture the roots, but you can fight the battle with us, because we're still in a battle. We're still in a battle for centuries, but we've come very far in the battle, but Lord knows we still in this battle. And music is everything. It breaks through any barrier I can think of. This man right there in the middle, I call him my uncle. I call him my uncle because I've known him since I was a kid. I call him my uncle because every time my father got on the phone and talked to this man and my dad needed something, and it didn't have to be green and paper, he came. He came.
You talking about John May?
Yes, sir.
Right.
I mean, yes, ma'am. Excuse me. I'm sorry. But yes, sir.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I am. I'm talking about Mr. John May. He came, and it wasn't because he was a black man living on Kings Highway in Theodore and all of that. It was because he loved him. He loved what he had. He knew the heritage. He knew the history. He knew the treasure chest. He was invested in that man. He loved the treasure. That's what we have these conversations for, to get people to understand, black or white, it's a treasure here, and we need all of us to continue to nurture these roots. These are our roots, but anybody can come and feed them and nurture them as long as you believe in it. So that's what the conversation is about. The conversation isn't about black or white. It is, but it's not. It's about nurturing the roots, nurturing the heritage, understanding the fight, understanding the struggle, believing in all those things, and making sure that you're willing to stand up and do it every single night. You stand up there and you get ready to put your axe on your shoulder, or you get ready to crack your knuckles and get ready to play those keys. That's what it's about.
Okay. Thank you, Alonzo. Okay, let's start to wrap up with our panelists. John, you.
I just got one thing about all this. I was actually performing with Henry when Henry won a Grammy, right? I'm on that record, but I didn't win that Grammy. Henry won that Grammy, and Alonzo, you went and picked it up for him. Not me, not a white guy, nobody. It was the son of Henry Townsend going to pick up Henry Townsend, a St. Louis blues artist. Got that Grammy, and I think he got it. Sadly, it was after he died, but he did get it.
Okay, quickly, panelists, what are some takeaway or suggestions for our audience participants to continue to reflect on? Quickly.
Believe in the power of music to bring people together and to unite our community, and get out there and support it and be evangelists for it, because nothing helps to promote the music more than just people saying to their friends, come out and support this.
Come on, let's do this.
For me, just be honest, don't be angry, and make sure you support the people that deserve to be supported. If they're true musicians, they're giving you their heart and soul, so you deserve to give something back. If it's money, great. If it's respect, always. But just tell the truth and don't be angry.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Dion Brown.
Kelly, KDHX, Jeremy, St. Louis Blues Society, Alonzo, Dr. Ross, thank you for having the National Blues Museum here. On behalf of my board of directors, I see Barrett Braun.
Okay.
Thank you. My takeaway is the blues is a healer. Blues is a unifier. It'll bring everybody together. Let's enjoy, support the National Blues Museum, support these other organizations, because if you don't support us, that's going to put musicians out of business. That's going to put us out of business. We need each other to make this whole melting pot work. In August, we're partnering with the Gateway Arch Foundation, and that's a series we do down there. Last year, we drew over 12,000 people. That's a combination. There's free concerts every Friday from 6 to 9. Local and national blues artists playing for free.
All right. So let's give our panelists a hand. Okay. As I close, and I know we're just a minute over 4 o'clock, please, on your way out, would you complete a feedback card? And if you want, you can sign up so that you can receive emails from KDHX about some of the programming that's taking place here, as well as when you complete the feedback card, it gives us, including me, okay, along with the KDHX staff and the St. Louis Blues Society, the information we need from you so that we can continue to develop these kind of conversations to be more meaningful and to help grow the support for blues artists in St. Louis. So everybody stand up and give yourself a hand, and thank you very much.